And welcome to episode 41 of John's Eclectic Photo Time Adventure. Once again, this is roll of 24 for the week of 2 through 8 February 2026. And this week, once again, we're very eclectic in a sense that I took some shots of the clouds after last week's full moon rising, the snow moon. So those turned out pretty interesting. And once again, we went down to the dog park with the camera. And so we have some very interesting dog photos. After the doggy park, Charlie and I went out, and Charlie got a chance to play down in the river. And lovely bride, I and Charlie went out to shoot a sunset, and we have a very interesting, we have a C-130 that was doing touch and go landings, and those were very interesting. And then we also went out to a Stillhouse Lake, the wildlife management area where the duck hunters and dove hunters go out and shoot. And we spent a couple hours out there taking some pictures of nature. And I have my I'm going to call it pop culture video or photo, which I actually blew up, and I'll show you. Very interesting. And then I had one night where it was clear, and I actually shot 3 different images, but only 2 of them came out. And I'll show that. This is a jellyfish nebula and the Bode Galaxy. So once again, thank you for joining me in this week, the week of 2 to 8 February. So I mentioned previously, and I said that I would explain it in this week's video, that I always try and do what's called one purposeful photograph per week. And so what I use is I get these lens bags that the lens comes in when I purchase these expensive lenses, and they never go back into those bags again. And so what I do with these bags, inside of each, one is the primary challenge, and the second one is an extra challenge to try and do something really new and unique. So for example, in this week's one that I'm doing, the primary challenge was hard to read. It's called shallow depth of field. And then to really challenge myself was to use f1.4 or below. And I only have 2 lenses that go down to below 1.4, and that's the Canon 50 millimeter, which goes down to 1.2, and the Canon 85 millimeter that goes down to 1.2. So that was the challenge for myself for a future week. And as I just mentioned, so I have these 2 bags, and yes, they get confused with each other. And so I'm not sure, when I originally thought up the concept that, okay, this is going to be the primary challenge, this is going to be the secondary sub-challenge to go with this. But considering these bags look the same and I did not label them, sometimes this one gets over on that side. So, like I just said, the primary challenge was for a shallow depth of field, but it could have been f1.4 or below, and then a shallow depth of field. So it's always hit and miss because I get the bags confused. So that is how I come up with my purposeful individual self-improvement challenges. And so there's a total of 24 pictures, but there's always going to be 1 or 2 pictures. Like for the train, after I got the front engine, I was still taking pictures as the train passed, and I do have a black and white, and I liked how it turned out too, because it's sharp right in the center, and then everything else is bokeh to the left and right. And for the challenge for the shallow depth of field and using 1.4 or below, and it's coming out of the Canon Pro 1000 right now, is that of a train. And I'll show this in detail once it comes out of the printer. But once again, this is one of those photos that was done with purpose. You'll see later that the front of the train is clear, crisp, and clean, while everything forward and back of it is going to be in bokeh, I guess is how the best term to say. So as I just stated, I have one photo per week that is purposeful, but here's an example of a photo that was, hey, this is pretty interesting, and this is for 2 weeks down. I don't know if you'd call it pop culture, what you would call it, but it was an image that I captured, and in the end, I didn't think I was going to be printing it off, but when I kept on staring at the 5x7 that I printed off, it was like, I don't know if it's just pop culture or what, but in the end, I really liked the coloring and just the uniqueness of something. So after printing off the 5x7, I was like, let's see how well this looks as a 17 by 22. And I'm going to flip it around again, and this is a really low megapixel picture. It was done with my cell phone. Even though I have the Pro Max 17, I did not have this set up for large megapixels. I think this turned out to be like 375 by 296. But it came out of the Canon Pro printer, Pro 1000, in excellent form. So let's begin this week's roll of 24. The next three images are of the clouds, and this is 2 days after the, or next day after the full moon, the snow moon that I showed last week. I was sitting outside, and the moon, the atmosphere, it just really presented some really interesting colors. And so went into the office, grabbed the R5 with the 100 to 500, and set up in the backyard. And I was like, okay, so I'm going to capture this with the bright full moon right in the center. And so one of the challenges was to go into Lightroom and use the remove object tool. And that was very successful. I was able to cleanly remove the center part, i.e. the full moon, and I proceeded to capture probably about 15, 20 different images. And of course, when I'm sitting out there starting, the upper atmospheric colors, the yellows, the orange that the moon was presenting, and then I go out with the camera, get it all set up on the tripod, get everything in focus, and then I got a bunch of low-level clouds coming in. But in the end, I think they're just really different, unique. You don't see too many of these things on other people's YouTube channels. And here we are out here at the doggy park. And I met two new dogs, actually three new dogs. The black one on the right, that's Hoppy. Not Happy, but Hoppy. And the center dog is Dakota, and of course Charlie's in the scene, and the little dog on the left, I forgot its name. Trying to remember all the different dogs' names is like becoming a substitute teacher in a kindergarten class, and trying to remember. I say that because for 6 months I was a substitute teacher when I was transitioning out of the Army, and I decided to try becoming a teacher, and no. And I really was trying to, this day, capture action shots of not just Charlie, but other dogs, because having a picture of a dog just sitting there, okay, that's pretty or handsome. But I really wanted to practice trying to capture some action shots, and so that's what I was doing here. As you can see, it was 1/800. I did have the ISO on auto, and it came out at 320 for this one, just because I was transitioning between brighter areas and then the dogs running underneath the trees and out of the trees and underneath the tables. I just thought this was really cool with how his paws are positioned. One of the challenges I did find, so in this photo, on the far left, the tan colored dog, that's name is Chewy, and Dakota, and then Hoppy. So we have three different textures, contrast of dogs. And that was kind of a challenge as they moved throughout the park, is trying to, if Hoppy was underneath the tree or in shade, then you would see two out of the three dogs. And so that was a real challenge for me. And so here's another action shot, and you'll see that this is at 1/3200. Once again, trying to capture Charlie in motion. Almost got all four paws up in the air. I got 3 out of 4, and the front right is just barely touching the ground. What's interesting is he's running over to the left, but you can see in his eyes that I guess he was watching me take pictures of him. So I'm still at 1/3200 of speed, and this is, so Charlie was running from left to right, and then he started running towards me, and I captured this. Now this time the right paw is up in the air and the other 3 are down on the ground. But the whole thing is he's got floppy ears, but both of his ears are up in the air this time. So just another unique, it was just a challenge for me to capture things in motion. And so here is a side-on view of Dakota. This was the first and only time I've seen that dog out there at the dog park. Very pretty colors and everything. And at this point, you can actually see up at the top the little green. That was a towel or something that the owner was waving up in the air to get Dakota to follow them. Still focusing on Dakota, so I'd actually gotten down on the ground to get level. People always say either shoot 2 or 3 feet above your height, which I'm 6 foot tall, or get down at the level with the animals that you're shooting. And so I did that. So as soon as I laid down, the 5 or 6 dogs that were out at the dog park saw me lay down, and they all started coming towards me, and I swung the camera around and captured this photo of Dakota as he and the others approached me laying down on the ground. So here I am laying down on the ground, and I had using the R6 Mark II, and I had it at H+, so that I'm doing 40 frames a second. And this was one of the last frames before not just Dakota, but the other dogs piled on me. And I just loved how this one turned out. The focus right there on the eyes. And I was using the 85, so I got a f1.2, nice, clear, sharp, and you can see how quickly it drops off in the depth of field there. So after about an hour, hour and a half over there at the doggy park, Charlie and I walked down this path, and then I curved around and got closer over to a river, and Charlie's at the end of his 16-foot leash here, and he was just having his field day. I think this was the second maybe time that he's ever gone running in water, and this is the first time in a small creek or river that he was able to play, and he was just going back and forth and just having a field day. So in this week, I have one purposeful picture, as I mentioned before, that I take, and that is this picture right here. And the primary challenge was complementary colors. And so I think I did a pretty good job in the sense that the sky is the blue, and of course the sunset is the orange, which are complementary colors on the color wheel. And the other photo that I printed off is, just because I just loved how well it looked, is Dakota, one of the dogs that was out there at the dog park that I photographed this week. As I just mentioned, so this is that purposeful picture with the complementary colors. And I failed to mention previously that the secondary challenge was product placement. Now, I'm not sure if this is a real good product placement, but I decided that for this one, the Air Force, come join the Air Force advertisement. So my product placement is the C-130 flying through the scene, and of course the complementary colors. As you can see in this image, this is an untouched image. This is how it came out. This is actually a raw photo, and this is one of the sequences. The C-130 kept on looping around probably 5 times, and this was near the end, and I had the R5 on this, and I'm at 1/1600 f11 because I've zoomed all the way out at 500. But you can see here that the ISO, because I had it on auto, bumped itself all the way up to 10,000. And here was the final image. The plane had just disappeared and landed, and I was still scanning from left to right. And it was just really amazing. This, once again, this is a raw photo. This is unedited. And you can see, so once again, the camera on auto ISO, it bumped itself all the way up to 12,800 in order to capture the scene. It was really getting dark where we were at. So I actually titled this as Photo 16. As the plane kept on rotating, doing the touch and goes, I took a whole bunch of videos, and so I put all those videos together inside of Final Cut Pro, and then made that into an MP4. That was a 33-minute video, and then I inserted it into here, and I did it at ×20. And the reason why it's so jerky, you'll see some parts where it's all over the place, was because, once again, I was hand holding the camera, and these are 5 different videos that were all tied in together. And so here are 5 photographs that I took of some wildlife down at Stillhouse Hollow Lake over in the wildlife management area. Once again, this is where the duck hunters, dove hunters come out in the fall and do some hunting. Got fortunate, nobody else was out there, so the birds were fairly calm, other than initially Charlie charging forward and scaring everything up. And so then I spent the next 45 minutes sitting there on a stool waiting for the birds to slowly come back into the area. I did shoot on the R5 Mark II, and I had it at H+, 30 frames a second. And there were a couple times where I did get excited and kind of filled up the buffer. And one of those was this scene right here. The bird in the prior picture finally took off and swinging around, zooming out. As you can see, this is at 700. I had the 1.4 extender attached to the 1:500. Now, one of the benefits of being out here in this wildlife management area, and since duck hunters and dove hunters have their own dogs, there is no leash requirement out here. So I was able to take Charlie's leash off, and once again, nobody else was around. And Charlie was just having pretty much a field day figuring out new things. Before this scene, he had found a big crawfish that looks like a baby lobster. And he spent about 5 minutes barking at it, and then he decided to eat it. There was a large flock of seagulls out there. I'm guessing that's what these are. They look like seagulls. Anyway, so there was probably about 40 or 50 of them at the end of this dirt area. And so I'd take 10 steps, raise the camera, shoot off 40 or 50 pictures, take 10 steps more, take another 40, 50 pictures. So you can see this is at 1600 f10 at 700 millimeters, and the ISO once again is on auto, and it's selected 640 for this frame. Well, at this point in the adventure, Charlie had chased off most of the birds, and I didn't help either. I kept on going closer and closer until there was one left. And so after they all flew away and didn't look like they were going to come back, it's like, okay, let's go ahead and turn around and let's take a landscape photo. And this is one of 3 dead trees. And I've shot this tree before in the past during the flower moon last year. As I mentioned earlier during the introduction, when I blew this up to a 17 by 22, I guess what I need to focus and pay attention to, once again, I think this is pop culture art or photography. Maybe it's got a different name. But once again, this was with the phone. And I wish I had taken the time to go get a camera. But once again, it did turn out rather nice. And I did take one recently of another, it's got to be called, I'm going to call it pop culture, that I'll include in a subsequent week that was very interesting. So I was fortunate in a sense that I had one clear night during this entire week where I was able to go out and set up the C-Star 50S telescope in my backyard. And I took 2 different images. This is an image before midnight, before everything changed. Anyways, this is part of the jellyfish. I only took 810 frames, and the frames are 10-second intervals. And when I compared this to what I see on the internet for IC 443, I probably need to get 6,000 or 7,000 images in order to get this to look anything like the full jellyfish nebula. So the official name for the jellyfish nebula is IC 443, and it is a supernova remnant located out there in the constellation of Gemini. What's interesting is this nebula is approximately 5,000 light years away from Earth, and the size of the nebula is estimated to be roughly 70 light years in size. So once again, I'm always amazed at what I'm able to capture just in my backyard with this telescope, something that's 5,000 light years away. So here is the last frame of this week's roll of 24. This is the Messer 81, which is known as NGC 3031, or the Bode's Galaxy. This galaxy is roughly 12 million light years away from Earth, and it's called a Grand Design Spiral Galaxy, and it's out there in the constellation Ursa, Ursa Major. And I hope you enjoyed this week's episode of Roll of 24. It was, once again, a very eclectic series of photos, which is what I'm striving for. Not to just stick with one thing. Once again, a little bit of everything, expert in nothing. But if you enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing and hit that like button. And I'll see you again next week. Enjoy the day.